The day my boss's first love came back, I dropped everything and ran away. 2 weeks later, he showed up at my door holding divorce papers, his eyes red with anger. Who said you're just a replacement? If anyone's the substitute here, it's her. Not you. The day Ethan's first love returned, I was helping him organize some documents. That jerk hadn't prepared anything in advance. He only remembered me when he suddenly needed something done. He had clearly told me I could take the day off, yet before work hours even began, he dragged me out of bed, rough and impatient, shoved me into his car, and sped straight to the office in downtown New York. After giving me a pile of work, he stepped on the gas again and drove off without another word. At first, I thought he had some multi-million-dollar business deal to discuss and was just about to compliment him for being so hardworking. But who would have guessed? That bastard had actually gone to pick up his precious, white moonlight. I quietly leaned closer to my coworkers, wanting to catch a bit of gossip. After all, even I, his personal secretary, didn't know anything about it, so how could they possibly know? A friend of mine just saw President Ethan at the airport, one of them said. Good thing I've shown her his photo before. She recognized him right away. She handed me her phone and zoomed in on the picture right in front of my face, as if I were half blind. Honestly, I wanted to tell her that my eyesight was perfect, 20/20 in both eyes. The glasses I wore were just for style. Secretary Chloe, don't you know the president's schedule today? Another colleague asked. I adjusted my glasses and smiled faintly. We're just employees. We handle our boss's work, not his private matters. We don't have the right, or the need, to interfere. Isn't that right, Jenna? Being suddenly called out, Jenna stiffened, glancing nervously between me and Vivian before blurting out, Yeah, that's right. Secretary Chloe is absolutely right. Vivian snorted coldly. Some people think that just because they've got a pretty face, they can climb into the boss's bed. Who knew he already had his first love back? Guess someone's nothing more than a smear on the wall now. Let's see how long she can keep acting proud. With that, she glared at me, stomped her 8-inch heels against the floor, and strutted off. I calmly rubbed my neck, feeling a bit of stiffness. Everyone in the company knew Vivian and I didn't get along, yet our desks were placed right next to each other. It was like pouring gasoline on a fire. At first, I used to argue back, but later, I just got tired of it. She only repeated the same few lines anyway. Nothing worth wasting energy on. Still, what happened today was a bit troublesome. The woman in that photo, if I remembered correctly, was Ethan's college crush, Grace. She really was beautiful and pure, the kind of woman who seemed untouched by the world. No wonder Ethan had never forgotten her all these years. And yet, he ended up marrying someone completely different from her. That's right. I was the one who secretly married Ethan. I knew from the very beginning that he only married me because of family pressure. Sure, I wasn't short on money, but whoever says no to more? So, I accepted his terms, secretly took my household registry from my mother's house in Seattle, and quickly registered our marriage. And just like that, our secret married life began. In the blink of an eye, more than a year had passed. Our lives together gradually found a rhythm, both in daily life and in bed. But now that Grace had come back, I suddenly didn't know what to do. Not because I still had feelings for Ethan. If he threw a $5,000 card in front of me right now, I'd sign the divorce papers and walk away without a second thought. But Ethan wasn't stupid. When we rushed into marriage, he had already calculated every single expense, transferring my living allowance monthly, always on time, even more punctual than my own paycheck. Truly a businessman among businessmen. Miss Chloe, are you not heading home yet? Jenna asked as she packed up her things, noticing I was still lost in thought. That was when I finally realized it was time to clock out. And as every office worker knows, one sacred rule is never to work for free, not even for a single minute, unless, of course, there's overtime pay. That's a completely different story. When I went downstairs, a message from Ethan popped up on my phone. I won't be home for dinner tonight. Get some rest early. Wow, so eager to be with his precious white moonlight, huh? I didn't even bother to feel anything. I simply replied, Got it, President Ethan. Then I switched off my work phone, pulled out my personal one, and texted my girls' group chat. The Glam Squad. Ladies, let's go out tonight. The old man isn't coming home. The replies blew up instantly. Plans, time, and place confirmed in seconds. I went home, changed into something chic, slipped on a pair of stiletto heels, and headed out the door. At the bar in Manhattan, I met up with the girls. "Why isn't your husband coming home tonight?" one of them teased. I took a sip of my cocktail and leaned against my friend with a bitter smile. His first love came back. Why would he care about a stand-in like me? Then tonight, we're not going home till we're drunk. The drinks kept coming, laughter filled the air, and for a while, everything felt light and easy. But when I finally made it home, I almost dropped to my knees in shock. Ethan was there. Why the hell was he home? Shouldn't he be in Grace's warm, gentle arms right now? Leaning against the doorframe, I sobered up halfway when his eyes swept over me. "You're back already?" I asked cautiously. Ethan stood up, rolled up his sleeves, and walked toward me. My legs trembled slightly. He knelt down on one knee and helped me change my shoes. If I hadn't seen the photos of him and Grace at the airport earlier, I might have been fooled by this sudden tenderness. This is my house. Why can't I come home?" he said quietly. I opened my mouth but couldn't find any words. The next second, he grabbed my wrist and pulled me into the bathroom. Damn it, I'd completely forgotten how much he hated me drinking. Later, I walked out rubbing my waist, silently swearing to myself that this time, I had to divorce him. Let Grace take care of this moody man from now on. Ethan lay beside me, his voice low and calm. "Are you going to the bar again next time?" In my heart, I thought, even if I do, what can you do about it? But out loud, I muttered obediently, "No, I won't go again." Ethan chuckled softly and pulled me tighter into his arms. The next morning, when I arrived at the office, the air was buzzing with gossip. Word was that someone new had been transferred in. But one glance at the file told me, this wasn't someone new. This was someone old. I slammed the folder on my desk, opened my laptop, and typed up my resignation letter. Then, while I was at it, I printed out the divorce papers too. After signing both, I marched straight to Ethan's office. To my surprise, he wasn't there. Probably off looking for Grace again, I figured. Whatever. I didn't need his permission anyway. I tossed the papers on his desk, turned around, and started packing my things. Vivian looked over, curious. "Where are you going?" I winked at her and smiled. "I'm quitting. Going to enjoy my life. You can keep being the corporate slave here." Without caring about anyone's reaction, I lifted my chin high and stepped into the elevator. "Hello, beautiful life. Here I come." When I got back to Ethan's mansion, I couldn't deny that after living here for over a year, leaving was a little hard. But honestly, compared to the regret of parting with this luxury villa, the joy of escaping my stingy, temperamental boss far outweighed it. I dragged out 2 huge suitcases, put my hands on my hips, and scanned the room. After a moment of careful thought, I decided, cheap things, leave them. Expensive things, take them all. After all, Ethan himself had said that whatever he bought for me was mine. Now that I was leaving, of course I had to take it. I stuffed every valuable item, every gift he'd ever given me, into the suitcases. They were packed so tightly I could barely close them. Without saying goodbye to anyone, I simply rolled them out the door. After all, it wouldn't be long before Ethan brought his new leading lady here. When that happened, everyone would be too busy fawning over her to remember the woman who came before. Did I look like the kind of woman who'd cry over a man? Of course not. The only thing I'd ever cry over was money. Just then, my phone buzzed. A message popped up. It was from Vivian, of all people. "Hey, Chloe. What did you mean earlier? Did you really quit?" I was in a good mood, so I replied to her message. "That's right. Didn't you hear me clearly, or do you have a hearing problem?" Vivian texted back almost instantly. "President Ethan hasn't even come back yet. What are you thinking?" I rolled my eyes and typed, "That's none of your business, but if you really like Ethan, I suggest you hurry up and make your move. Who knows, maybe you'll get the chance to replace me. Just don't start whining when the next girl takes the spot and you're left jealous." Then I added one last line. "Anyway, I'm busy now. No need to keep each other on WeChat. Deleting you." I hit send and immediately blocked and deleted Vivian from my contacts. If I weren't still waiting for Ethan to meet me to sign the divorce papers, I would have deleted his number too. At the moment, Ethan was away on a business trip. Worried he might overlook the documents I'd left on his desk, I texted him a quick reminder. Check the papers on your desk when you get back. He replied a moment later. Are they important? I stared out the car window, watching the city lights blur by. After thinking for a moment, I answered, pretty important. You'll know when you get home. Then his next message came in. By the way, that necklace you liked last time, I bought it. I'll give it to you when I'm back. My lips parted slightly and I bit down on them in frustration. Damn it. Suddenly, I regretted quitting too early. I should have waited to get the necklace before handing in my resignation. Big mistake. Huge mistake. I didn't reply to his message. Instead, I sat there, sulking in silence for a while before pulling myself together. After all, I'd saved quite a bit of money over the years. It wasn't like I couldn't buy myself a necklace. With that thought, I drove to my new place, an apartment I'd bought before marrying Ethan. Back then, I was still paying the mortgage, but after our marriage, he generously covered the remaining balance for me. He hadn't been as stingy then as he was now, and I had spent money freely without a second thought. Thinking back now, I was grateful I bought that apartment. It was small but warm, perfect for me. It took me the whole afternoon to clean the place before I started unpacking. I carefully arranged everything in the closet, then finally flopped down on the bed, exhausted. Pulling out my phone, I opened my group chat with the Glam Squad. Ladies, I'm officially single again. Anyone got a hot guy to introduce to me? The replies exploded immediately. My phone buzzed non-stop with messages of excitement and curiosity. I gave them a brief rundown of what had happened, and one of the girls quickly responded, Damn, that's not bad at all. A fake marriage that pays off with luxury goods? Girl, you're winning. I thought about it for a second and realized it wasn't exactly fake. After all, Ethan and I had done everything a married couple should do, just without a wedding ceremony or a public announcement. But those details I kept to myself. Soon, photos of handsome men started flooding the chat, one after another, each more attractive than the last. My eyes practically sparkled, and I nearly drooled. They were all ridiculously good-looking. After staring so long that I got dizzy, I couldn't even decide who to pick. So one of the girls said boldly, You like them all? Then go on dates with all of them. I laughed until my eyes curved into crescents. Deal. Soon enough, the dates were arranged. But after meeting a few guys, I began to notice something strange. Ethan still hadn't contacted me about the divorce. That wasn't normal. When I asked around, I found out that his business trip hadn't ended yet, which meant he still didn't know that I'd quit. I rested my chin in my hand, feeling a little uneasy. My friend noticed I'd gone quiet and lifted her wine glass. What's wrong? Not drinking anymore? I rubbed my back nervously and whispered, Do you feel that? Like someone's staring at us? She looked around the bar, then suddenly froze, her face going pale. Chloe, she hissed. You might want to turn around. Is that cheap soon-to-be ex-husband of yours standing over there? My entire body stiffened, but I quickly regained my composure. What was I afraid of? I'd already filed for divorce. It's not like he could stop me from finding my second love. I slowly turned my head, and sure enough, there was Ethan. He was wearing a perfectly pressed suit that looked completely out of place in the noisy bar. Even from a distance, I could tell his expression was dark as night. When he saw me turn around, his jaw tightened and he raised an eyebrow, motioning for me to come over. I immediately understood what my friend meant. She patted my shoulder. Go deal with it, girl. We'll keep partying. You handle your business. Got it. I'll be right back. I could practically feel Ethan burning holes through me with his stare. Flashing my friend a reassuring smile, I turned and walked toward him. But before I could say anything, he grabbed my wrist and yanked me into a narrow alley. People around us turned to look, concern written all over their faces. Some even looked like they wanted to step in. I forced a strained smile and waved a hand to signal I was fine. Ethan, what the hell are you doing? He pressed me against the wall, his eyes sharp and dangerous. Having fun drinking with those young guys, huh? I crossed my arms and glared at him. What's missing here is probably a green hat for you to wear. He frowned deeply, his voice dropping lower. I just got off the plane and came straight here to find you. You think I had time to stop by the office? I rolled my eyes. Fine, you're off the hook, but tell me something. Why didn't you go see your precious white moonlight? Why come looking for me? He stared at me in silence, and I sighed. Go back to the office and check the documents on your desk. And about Grace, I already know everything. Let's just end this peacefully. You can be with her, and I'll forgive the fact that I was just a substitute. Now please, stop getting in the way of me finding my next boyfriend. I pushed him away and turned to leave, but Ethan's hand tightened around my wrist. His voice dropped into that dangerously calm tone that always made my stomach twist. You really think finding your second love will be that easy, Chloe? You think I'm just gone for good? My patience snapped. The truth was, I'd never been a particularly patient person to begin with. The only reason I'd tolerated him before, respected him even, was because he paid for my living expenses and was my boss. But now, I was quitting, getting divorced, and done with all of it. Why should I care how he felt? I jerked my hand free. He looked genuinely stunned for a second, frozen in place, and I took the opportunity to turn on my heel and walk away, my high heels clicking sharply against the pavement. I raised my hand to flag a cab. But before the car even pulled up, Ethan caught up to me, wrapped his arms around me from behind, and half dragged, half lifted me into his car. Ethan, let me go. I struggled, kicking and pushing, but it was useless. Our movements drew too much attention. People were openly staring now. He leaned close and said in a low, threatening tone, "Unless you want to spend the night explaining this at a police station, I'd suggest you behave." I hated his threatening attitude, but I wasn't exactly eager to take a field trip to the precinct either. So I gave up resisting, for now. Still, the moment I got in the car, I made sure to stomp hard on his foot with my heel. He didn't even flinch. Not a word, not a wince. Nothing. He just closed the door calmly, walked around to the driver's seat, and started the engine, one hand steady on the steering wheel. As inappropriate as it was for me to notice, I had to admit, Ethan did have that quietly commanding masculine presence about him. But that fleeting thought vanished the moment I recognized the road we were on. "Where are you taking me?" I asked warily. He didn't even look at me, his lips pressed into a hard line. "I'm not going back," I said firmly. "I already moved out of your house. There's no reason to go back there. Whatever you need to say, just say it here." Ethan ignored me completely, his face growing darker by the second. The tension in the car thickened until I could almost feel the air drop in temperature. For the sake of my own life, I shut my mouth. Judging by his expression, I was genuinely afraid that one wrong word would make him stomp the gas pedal and send us both straight to hell. When the car turned into a familiar gated community, my stomach dropped. The security guard at the entrance bowed politely like always, but Ethan didn't even acknowledge him. Not a nod, not a glance. That was when it finally hit me. Something was seriously wrong. Ethan was the kind of man who always maintained a polite, controlled demeanor, no matter the situation. The fact that he couldn't even muster a simple greeting meant only one thing. His mood was really, really bad. It wasn't just bad, it was really bad. A sudden wave of fear crept up my spine. If I'd known things would turn out like this, I would have preferred he had taken me to the police station earlier. At least there, I'd have been safe. The car stopped in the underground parking garage. Ethan got out without a word, walked around to the passenger side, yanked the door open, and pulled me out. Then he slammed the door shut so hard the echo rang painfully through the quiet garage, making my skin prickle. Without giving me a chance to protest, he grabbed my wrist and dragged me toward the elevator. The housekeeper, startled by the noise, hurried out to see what was happening, but before she could even say a word, Ethan had already hauled me upstairs and shoved me into the master bedroom. I barely had time to react before he pushed me down onto the bed. I tried to squirm away, but he pinned me in place, his grip strong around my legs. "What are you trying to hide, Chloe? You moved out, went drinking behind my back. Did you even feel a shred of guilt?" I blinked up at him, genuinely confused. I had no idea what he was so furious about. Was Grace the one who'd upset him, and now he was taking it out on me? Like hell, I was gonna let that slide. I didn't know where the strength came from, but suddenly I flipped us over, pushing him down against the bed and straddling him. Looking down at him from above, I sneered, "Got kicked out by Grace, huh? And now you're here trying to vent your anger on me?" Seeing the look on his face, frustrated, humiliated, vulnerable, Honestly, I wanted to slap him. But then I remembered, we weren't officially divorced yet, and the assets hadn't been divided. So I clenched my fists and swallowed the urge. Ethan's anger faltered. His brows were still furrowed, but the raw fury in his expression began to fade. "How did you find out about Grace?" I scoffed. "You thought you hid it well?" "If you really wanted to hide it," I continued, "you wouldn't have rushed to bring her into the company like that. I know everything. How you dragged me into work that day just so you'd be free to pick her up. Don't even try to deny it. And when we got married, you said no special treatment, claimed you wanted to keep business and personal matters separate. Yet the moment Grace showed up, you handed her a high-ranking position without blinking." My teeth were clenched as I spat out the words. Ethan's tone hardened. "You're being unreasonable. That's not true." "Really?" I shot back. "Then tell me, did you or did you not go to the airport to pick up Grace that day?" His lips parted, but no words came out. His silence was answer enough. I didn't want to hear another word. In my mind, his guilt was already confirmed. I swung my legs off the bed, slipped my shoes back on, and didn't bother looking at him. "All the documents are on your desk. Fill them out and let me know when you're done." Without waiting for a response, I pulled open the door and walked downstairs. It was already late, and after being dragged here by Ethan, I wasn't even sure if I could still get a ride home. "Miss Chloe," the housekeeper said gently, stepping forward, "why don't you stay the night? It's late, and—" I pressed my lips together and shook my head. "No need. I'll call someone to pick me up. Go rest." Before she could say anything else, I strode toward the door. I could feel Ethan's eyes burning into my back, but I didn't look back once. I lifted my chin and kept walking straight ahead. When I reached the front gate, I saw a familiar face. Ethan's personal secretary, the real one. Not me, the stand-in who'd once pretended to be one. "Mrs. Morgan," he said politely, "President Ethan asked me to drive you home. It's quite late, and getting a cab right now won't be easy." I didn't want to have anything to do with Ethan anymore, but I wasn't foolish enough to risk my own safety out of pride. So I sighed and nodded tiredly. After giving the secretary my address, I added, "And please, tell your boss to stop keeping tabs on me." The man gave a stiff, awkward smile, clearly not in a position to promise anything. I didn't push it. After all, we were both just employees once, caught in the orbit of a man like Ethan Morgan. When we finally reached my apartment, I went straight to bed and lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying everything that had happened tonight with Ethan. It really had been one long, never-ending drama from start to finish. When I first married Ethan, I'd known this day would come eventually. But when it actually arrived, I realized it wasn't as simple as I'd imagined. Still, why was I feeling this way? Annoyed? Upset? But why should I be? Did I like Ethan? Of course not. Then what the hell was I feeling uncomfortable about? I'd already moved out. We'd talked everything through. All I needed to do now was sell the expensive stuff I took from his house on a resale site, then book myself a trip somewhere. That sounded like freedom. Like happiness. Who knew? Maybe I'd even meet a hot guy while traveling. Wouldn't that be perfect? And it wasn't like I had to worry about bumping into Ethan and Grace ever again. Just thinking about it made me feel better already. The next morning, I posted every single item I'd brought from Ethan's house on the online resale marketplace. Some buyers clearly knew the value of good things, but for the high-end pieces, I asked a few acquaintances to help me sell them discreetly. When everything was finally listed, I checked my bank account, and the number staring back at me made me grin so hard my cheeks hurt. The rush of satisfaction I felt was honestly better than the feeling of being in Ethan's arms. Wait. Why was I even thinking about him again? Just then, my phone buzzed with a friend request. From all people, it was Vivian. What, she missed me that much? After everything I'd said to her, she still had the nerve to send me a request? Well, whatever. My motto these days was, whoever comes knocking, I'll open the door. So I accepted. The message came almost instantly. "Chloe, you need to come back. Seriously, I've seen it all now. There really are women out there even faker than you." I frowned. "Excuse me? When exactly was I ever fake?" Vivian ignored that completely. "You have no idea. That new woman who got transferred in, she's beyond saving. President Ethan just got back from his trip, and she's already all over him." acts one way in front of the men and another in front of us, pretends to be innocent while making us look bad. I counted on my fingers. Today was Friday, which meant it was Ethan's first day back at the office, so Grace was already starting her little games on day one? Wow, impressive speed. You're upset already? Didn't I tell you to make your move earlier if you liked Ethan? Now look, someone else beat you to it. Vivian didn't reply to that text, but seconds later my phone started ringing. I sighed but picked up anyway. I wasn't above listening to a little gossip. Are you trying to get me killed? She hissed the moment I answered. You told me to go flirt with President Ethan? I nearly had a heart attack. He came into the office this morning, and when he walked out, his face was so cold it could freeze someone to death. When I went in to drop off a document, my legs were literally shaking. So, he's already back in the office, huh? I murmured, half to myself. Then he must have seen the papers I left on his desk. Still, it was strange that he hadn't contacted me yet. How long could it possibly take to sign a piece of paper? It was already Friday. Was he planning to drag this out for another 2 days? While I was lost in thought, Vivian's voice faded into background noise until she called my name several times. Chloe, are you even listening to me? Yeah, I hear you, I said lazily. Let me guess, she accidentally spilled coffee on herself and blamed you for it? Vivian groaned in frustration. Exactly. How'd you know? Please, I said dryly, haven't you seen that act 1,000,000 times? Is that really worth getting mad over? I can't believe that woman actually dared to mess with me. Vivian snarled through gritted teeth. You have to come back, Chloe. She's clearly after your position. At this rate, she'll take it from me, and her salary's probably even higher than what the president's secretary makes. I stretched my legs out on the bed and replied absent-mindedly, if she can land that position, it's because she's got the skills. If you want to compete, go for it. Who knows? Maybe Ethan will finally notice you. Vivian let out a sharp scoff. Ugh, I don't even know why I bothered talking to you. You're not planning on coming back anyway, are you? Of course not, I said, grinning as I packed my suitcase. I'm getting ready to travel, and if you still want to keep me on your friends list, don't blame me when I start sending you pictures from my trip. Go ahead, Vivian scoffed. You think I'll be jealous? You quit a high-paying job. Let's see how long it takes before you regret it. I laughed quietly and didn't bother replying. No matter what I said, Vivian would never admit she was jealous of me. After listening to her rant about Grace for another 10 minutes, I finally hung up. Seeing that our call had lasted over 2 hours, I couldn't help but chuckle. Back when we worked together, she couldn't stand the sight of me, yet now that I'd quit, we were suddenly close friends. Life was weird like that. The next morning, I woke up to find my phone completely silent. Still no call, no text from Ethan. It was strange. His precious white moonlight was already back. Why hadn't he asked for a divorce yet? Wasn't that what he'd always wanted? If he didn't hurry up, how was I supposed to go on vacation in peace? Since I didn't want to message him directly, I decided to text his assistant instead. Did President Ethan not see the divorce papers I left on his desk? The assistant, Mr. Chu, replied politely, He saw them, Mrs. Morgan. Then why hasn't he called me to finalize the divorce yet? I typed back, impatient. Does Grace even know about this? You think she's fine with it? Mr. Chu hesitated. Mrs. Morgan, I don't think Miss Grace has anything to do with this matter. Doesn't have anything to do with it? I muttered. If he doesn't divorce me soon, what? He's planning to let her play girlfriend while he's still legally married? Maybe I should give him a lecture on the criminal charge for bigamy. But, after thinking about it for a moment, I decided to drop it. Maybe Ethan had his own plan. Maybe he was just waiting for the right time. Unfortunately, before he could make any move at all, I received a shocking piece of news first thing the next morning. When I woke up, my inbox was flooded with messages from people at Ethan's company. Congratulatory messages, of all things. I blinked in confusion. Why were they congratulating me? I didn't even work there anymore. Did they think I'd gotten a new job or something? Then my phone rang. It was Vivian. Chloe, she said, her voice practically trembling with disbelief. So it's true. You really married President Ethan? I nearly dropped my phone into the sink. What the hell are you talking about? Apparently, our secret marriage wasn't so secret anymore. Vivian continued breathlessly. President Ethan came to the office this morning wearing a wedding ring, and get this, he accidentally dropped your marriage certificate right in front of the elevator. Someone picked it up, and guess what they saw first? Your wedding photo. For a few seconds, I just sat there, completely stunned. What was wrong with him? Why would he bring our marriage certificate to the office? We'd never even bought wedding rings, so where did that ring come from? I hung up on Vivian before she could say another word and immediately called Ethan. He picked up after just 2 rings, like he'd been waiting for my call. Ethan Morgan, I snapped the moment he answered. What the hell is wrong with you? Why are you wearing a wedding ring to work? Why was our marriage certificate in your pocket? And how could you drop it, right in front of everyone, so the whole company could see our photo? A low, amused chuckle came through the phone. He was laughing? At a time like this? Coincidence, he said casually. If anyone asks, just say it was a coincidence. Coincidence my ass, I shouted, my voice rising. You've made such a scene. Isn't Grace jealous? Or what, are you doing this on purpose because she's still ignoring you, trying to provoke her by flaunting your marriage to me? The line went quiet. I thought the signal had dropped, but then I heard his voice again, calm, measured, and far too serious. Chloe, whatever's between Grace and me, it's not what you think. I scoffed out loud. Oh, please. Everyone who knows anything about your past knows she was your college sweetheart. Just hurry up and deal with it, I snapped. I don't want to see you anymore. Before he could respond, I hung up. Not long after, my phone rang again. Vivian, of course. Her name flashing on the screen instantly annoyed me, but I still picked up. Wait, Chloe, are you really married to President Ethan? She blurted out. No way, that has to be fake. I don't believe it. I groaned, rubbing my temples. Thinking about how I'd once mocked her for the same thing made my face burn with embarrassment. You could have told me earlier, she complained. I forced a small smile even though she couldn't see it. Didn't I already tell you it's fake? Give it a few days, you'll see for yourself. Vivian clearly didn't believe me. No matter what she said, I kept answering the same way. It's fake. All of it. After hanging up, I finally let the quiet sink in. For the first time, I realized I hadn't been as calm or carefree as I pretended to be. I thought I could cut ties with Ethan easily, but maybe it wasn't that simple. Once I understood that, I became even more determined to end things completely. I didn't want my life tainted by a transactional marriage any longer. As expected, Grace was the one who reached out first. She asked to meet. I didn't refuse. Honestly, I was curious to see what she looked like now. Back when Ethan and I first got married, some of his friends had said Grace and I were total opposites. At that time, she was still living abroad, so we never met. When we finally sat down together, I took a moment to quietly observe her before lifting my cup for a sip of coffee. She really was nothing like me. Grace looked soft and pure, like a jasmine flower, delicate and gentle. I, on the other hand, even without makeup, carried the sharpness and confidence of a rose. No wonder people said Ethan's taste had changed over the years. I suppose you already know about my relationship with Ethan, she asked, her tone calm but cautious. Yes, I said simply. She hesitated, then leaned forward slightly. So, when will you divorce him? I know this must be unfair to you, but I really want to be there for him, to take care of him. And I heard you two didn't get married for love. My hand froze in midair. Not many people knew that. So she must have heard it from Ethan himself. Yes, she said softly when I didn't reply, as if confirming my suspicion. So their relationship was that close already. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Miss Grace, I said, I don't know if he hasn't told you or if you've misunderstood, but I've already left the divorce papers on his desk. If he hasn't signed them yet, that's his problem, not mine. Setting my cup down, I looked her straight in the eye. Her face had gone pale, and for some reason, seeing that made me feel oddly relieved. Or maybe, I added, he doesn't love you as much as you think. If he truly did, he would have divorced me the moment he knew you were coming back. Grace forced a smile, clearly trying to comfort herself. Maybe, he's just been busy. I'll ask him about it when I get back. I couldn't stand her fragile expression any longer. I paid for my drink and left. On the way home, I passed by the bar I often went to. I hesitated for a moment before turning around and walking in. That night, I drank far too much. Sitting on the curb, waiting for a cab, I drunkenly pulled out my phone and called Ethan. "Do you have to torture me like this?" I said, my voice slurring. "The divorce papers are already on your desk. Why won't you sign them? What's left between us anyway? Once we're divorced, you can chase after your precious white moonlight, and I can finally live my own life. She's already back. What do you need a substitute for?" The other end of the line stayed silent. Then his voice came, low and steady. "Chloe, you're not a substitute. Things aren't what you think." "Then explain it," I shot back. But he stayed silent again. That was what I hated most, his silence. "You're a coward, Ethan," I said bitterly. "You're hurting all three of us. You've disappointed me more than I thought possible." "Fine, then wait 2 more years. I'll take it to court myself." Without waiting for a response, I hung up, blocked his number, and got into the cab. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and a blank mind. But when I remembered everything that happened the night before, my eyes suddenly stung. I raised a hand and wiped away the tears that had escaped. So that was it. I'd actually fallen for him. That's why it hurt. That's why I felt wounded. After that night, Ethan stopped reaching out to me. Which, of course, made sense. I'd blocked him everywhere. Even if he wanted to find me, he couldn't. Vivian, on the other hand, kept contacting me. Every day she'd complain about Grace, how she acted all innocent, pretending to be some perfect white moonlight, while Ethan always looked cold and distant around her. Part of me wanted to hear it, but another part didn't. Still, because Vivian never shut up, I ended up getting all the updates whether I wanted them or not. It was almost like I hadn't quit the company at all. One night, I woke up and stepped out onto the balcony for some air. That was when I noticed a car parked below, headlights still on. I squinted, and my heart skipped a beat. It was Ethan. Even after seeing him, I didn't go downstairs. I didn't know what he was thinking. What was he trying to do? Did he want both Grace and me? Life didn't work that way. I turned back inside, lay down, and stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Finally, I unblocked Mr. Chu on WeChat and sent a message. "Tell him to leave. If he keeps waiting under my building, I'll move out again." The next morning, I got a reply confirming that Ethan had left. That night, his car didn't appear. But I knew this couldn't go on forever. Ethan wasn't signing the divorce papers. Was I supposed to just wait around for him forever? Of course not. I decided to go ahead with my travel plans. I picked a destination I'd always wanted to visit, booked my flights and hotels, and started packing. But just as I was about to leave, I got a message from Vivian. Grace got arrested by the police. I jumped up from bed, wide awake. What? She broke the law? For a moment, I even thought of bigamy. But no, that didn't make sense. If that were the case, the one getting arrested should have been Ethan, not her. "I don't know the details," Vivian continued quickly, "but President Ethan brought the police himself. The whole company's in chaos right now, and he went with them too." I pressed my lips together, uneasy. Something about this didn't feel simple. But aside from Ethan, who else could possibly explain what was going on? "I have to get back to work," Vivian said hurriedly. "I'll update you later. Honestly, if you'd quit a month later, you could have witnessed this drama in person." "Go work," I muttered, rolling my eyes and ending the call. I debated whether to go to the police station, but realized I didn't even know which one they were at. So I stayed home, waiting anxiously for any news. Hours passed with no updates from anyone, not even Vivian. By evening, my nerves were shot. I finally unblocked Ethan on WeChat and typed, "You've played around long enough. Bring the divorce papers, and let's talk in person." His reply came almost immediately. I set the phone down, frowning. Something about this felt off. I cleaned the apartment, changed my clothes, then sat down again, only to realize I was overthinking everything. Why was I acting like this meeting was such a big deal? So I changed back into my casual clothes and went about my usual routine. Just as I stepped into the living room, there was a knock on the door. When I opened it, Ethan was standing there, breathing heavily, clutching the divorce papers I'd left on his desk. "Who said you were just a replacement?" he said, voice low and firm. "If anyone's the substitute, it's her, not you. Chloe, from beginning to end, I've never seen you as anyone else." For a moment I froze. Were all those rumors just made up? I bit my lip, hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in." Ethan changed his shoes and followed me into the apartment, closing the door behind him softly. It was unlike him. Too cautious, too restrained. He sat across from me, exhaustion written all over his face. On the coffee table between us was the divorce agreement, with only my signature on it. "I heard Grace was arrested," he said quietly. "Why did she steal the company's confidential files and sell them to a competitor?" Ethan said quietly. I blinked, surprised. Grace did that? It didn't sound right. She'd always seemed so gentle, so devoted to him. She didn't seem like the type to do something like that. Seeing the disbelief on my face, Ethan took out his phone and played an audio recording. It was a conversation between him and Grace. "Grace, if you divorce Chloe and marry me, I'll delete every confidential file I have. If not, those files will appear in your biggest competitor's inbox within seconds." "Ethan, you've done this before. Last time it was for money. What about this time? Is it for me?" Grace, after a long silence. "Yes, for you. If I didn't still love you, I wouldn't have taken the risk to come back. You knew I was the one back then, didn't you? You just couldn't prove it. And even now, you still don't have any evidence." I looked up at Ethan. For the first time, I saw exhaustion written all over his face. I'd never heard anything about his company ever leaking confidential information. By the time I joined the firm, his empire had already been thriving. Ethan turned off the recording and rubbed his face with both hands, like it took everything he had just to say this aloud. "Just like she said," he began, voice hoarse, "5 years ago, Grace had just graduated and joined my company. But for money, she secretly sold our confidential data to a rival firm. When we discovered it, she had already taken the money and fled overseas, leaving the company on the brink of collapse. Without evidence, we couldn't take legal action. All we could do was grit our teeth and survive through the aftermath. But I never stopped looking for her. She was good at hiding, so good that even after years I couldn't find a trace." He paused, his jaw tightening. "Then, 2 years ago, I realized someone had been following my social media accounts. Around the same time, rumors about my college sweetheart started spreading again. That's when I suspected Grace was secretly keeping tabs on me from abroad. By then, I had already pieced the rest together." "So that's why you married me," I said flatly. "You deliberately chose someone completely opposite of her, so she'd think that, despite what she did, you still hadn't forgotten her. That you both loved and hated her, and married someone who could replace her." Ethan's face darkened, guilt flickering in his eyes. "Yes. Not long ago, she reached out to me on her own. She thought that if she came back, I'd forgive what she did. I used that chance to draw her out, so I could finally catch her red-handed. So that was it. Everything from the start had been nothing more than a trap, a carefully constructed game set by Ethan. And me? I was just another pawn on his board. He must not have expected that he'd eventually fall for his own pawn." "This time," Ethan continued, "the confidential files she stole were the ones I intentionally let her see. When she came to find me, everything was already in place. All I had to do was let her walk right into the trap." I nodded slowly, a bitter smile tugging at my lips. "So the reason you refused to sign the divorce papers was because you were using me to provoke her, to make her slip up?" Ethan's expression softened, guilt flooding his voice. "That was part of it, yes. But the real reason..." He took a deep breath. "Chloe, I didn't want to divorce you. I love you." For a moment I couldn't bring myself to doubt him. You can always tell when someone truly means it. But I couldn't stay in a marriage that had started as a scheme, no matter how real his feelings might be now. "I married you willingly," I said quietly. "At the time, I was naive enough to think I wouldn't fall for you. But clearly I overestimated myself. Even so, that doesn't mean I'll stay. My marriage shouldn't have begun with deception. And if you had this whole plan from the beginning, why didn't you tell me? Were you afraid I'd accidentally expose it?" Ethan's shoulders slumped, and in that moment, he looked completely defeated. The man who once commanded storms in the business world now looked like someone who had lost everything. "I'm sorry," Ethan said quietly, his voice rough. "Grace was too cautious. I was afraid that if I didn't catch her this time, there'd never be another chance." I reached out and patted his shoulder gently. "You don't need to apologize. After all, I didn't exactly come into this marriage with pure intentions either. You wanted to find Grace, and I wanted your money." When you think about it, we're really not that different, are we? He looked at me for a long moment, eyes full of something between guilt and desperation. Do we really have to get divorced? I met his gaze and nodded. Yes, I can't stay in a marriage built on deception and transactions. Ethan let out a long, weary sigh. All right, he said softly. I understand. The next day, we went together to finalize the divorce paperwork. Looking around the room at the other couples, some crying, some arguing, I realized we were probably the calmest pair there. So calm it barely looked like we were getting divorced at all. When everything was signed, Ethan took his copy of the divorce certificate while I turned to leave. Can I have another chance? He asked suddenly. I smiled faintly. We're both free now, Ethan. I can't stop you from chasing whoever you want. Any chance you get from now on, that's yours to make, not mine to give. I patted his shoulder lightly. Take care of yourself, all right? Catching sight of Mr. Chu, who had just arrived, I nodded politely and declined Ethan's offer to drive me home. I took 2 steps away before remembering something and turned back. Oh, by the way, one more thing, I said, tilting my head. All those gifts you gave me? I sold them. Hope you don't mind. I stuck out my tongue playfully. Ethan stared at me for a moment, then smiled, a weight visibly lifting off his shoulders. They were yours the moment I gave them to you. You can do whatever you want with them. I don't mind. Good, I said, smiling. Then I'll be going. I wish you great success in everything. By the time I told Vivian about the whole thing, I was already on a train to Santa Clara. I'd thought about flying, but in the end, I wanted to slow down, to actually feel the journey for once. You really divorced President Ethan? Vivian's voice crackled through the phone, full of disbelief. You just let a millionaire go like that? Don't come crying to me later if you regret it. If you like him that much, I teased, you should have fought for him yourself. Oh, please, she groaned. Just looking at his face gives me anxiety. I laughed out loud at that. After a moment, she sighed. I'm seriously jealous of you, you know? Quitting your job, traveling wherever you want, sounds like heaven. Then you should quit too, I said lightly. Not everyone can afford to live like you, Chloe, she said with a laugh. Then her voice softened, more sincere this time. Have fun, okay? You deserve it. Her words made me pause for a second. Then I smiled. Yeah, I know. Half a month passed quietly in Santa Clara. One morning, as I was enjoying my coffee, I suddenly heard someone calling my name from outside the window. I pushed it open, and there was Ethan, standing below, dressed simply, a faint smile on his lips. Leaning against the window frame, I crossed my arms. What are you doing here? He looked up at me. I was wondering if I could have the honor of taking Miss Chloe out for a walk. I couldn't help laughing, my eyes bright despite myself. I wanted to run straight down there, but I forced myself to play it cool. Oh, really? I said, pretending to think. Well, I suppose I can grant you that honor. Wait for me downstairs, I added with a teasing grin before closing the window. The past marriage was over. As for what the future held, who could say? For now, I just wanted to enjoy the moment.